Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about the studio culture you never meant to build. Studio culture isn't something you have. It's something you're constantly creating, whether you realize it or not. And for most indie teams, that's exactly the problem. The culture is taking shape inside your studio, and it might not be the one you intended. And by the time you notice, the damage may already be done. So today, we're going to dive deep into what unintentional culture actually looks like and how to spot it before it holds your team back, and what it takes to build an environment where both your people and games can thrive. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everyone, and we're back, and today with us I have Zoe Curnoe. Zoe, how's it going? It's so great to have you here on the show today.
It's great. It's actually finally warm in Vancouver, so I'm excited.
Yes,
It's been super gray and rainy, and now it's sunny, so it's good. It's a good day.
All my friendly Canadians have been enduring such... Okay, so I'm in the Northeast in the United States, and it's been pretty cold. And then I remind myself that, but for your northern neighbors, it's much colder.
It's true. It's true. Vancouver, we mostly get gray and rain. So we just get no sunshine for like 8 months. It's a little depressing.
Yeah, it's
today it's shining. It's spring. The birds are singing. It's like, oh, okay.
We should have done this episode outside, like remotely, but outside.
We could have. It's true. Birds chirping.
I love it, folks. Zoe here. Just a quick introduction. She is the executive and leadership coach at Lumina Leadership. That's also, I might be mixing things up, but it's Lumina Leadership. You're also the COO as well, if I understand correctly, or please just give us a...
sole proprietorship. So it's my own company where I'm the founder. Yeah, the founder and principal of it. So you could say I'm the CEO of it because it's my company for sure. But I run the day-to-day of everything involved in it as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. If you could, tell us a little bit about that and even maybe some of, past experiences or work that you've done just to get to know you a little bit more.
Absolutely. I'm happy to talk about that. So I've been making video games. So I am a coach, executive coach and leadership coach now, but I've been working in the games industry since the early 2000s, almost 25 years. And it's really been my whole professional career. I mean, before that, dipped my toe into a few different things, but then found games and was like, oh, these are my people. So, and that's been going for a long time. And so I've worked, all over the world. We were just chatting about Australia a little bit before we started. I worked in Australia. I lived in Brisbane, worked at Pandemic Australia for a while. Spent a lot of my career here in Vancouver. So I worked at the big studios like EA. I did a stint at Riot Games down in LA as well. So I've lived in LA twice. I worked at Pandemic LA and Riot LA as well. And then I found myself here back in Vancouver at the Coalition. So I worked there for 8 years. So big bulk of my career there, leading the campaign team on Gears of War 4, Gears 5, and then the Hivebusters DLC, and then New Game Plus, and all of those things. Dabbled a little bit in the new Gears game that is coming out. Oh gosh, I actually don't even know when it's coming out because I don't work there anymore, but soon, we all hope. And then I actually founded my own game studio when I left the Coalition. So in 2021, I founded Timber Games. Did that for a couple of years. It was such a wonderful time in 2021 when the money was flowing and everyone was like, start a studio, please. Everyone's at home playing games. The pandemic will last forever. Surprised that didn't happen. And so in early 2024, I did leave that studio to kind of follow this dream I'd had for a long time, which was, hey, when I'm 55, I'm going to go become a coach and consultant for the games industry in leadership, because I saw so many people that needed help. And I saw so many leaders just kind of struggling with being thrown into a role they didn't really understand and just like, hey, go be a people manager, go lead a team of 200 people. And they're like, oh, okay. And so I really wanted to help those people. And so I left and started Lumina Leadership in 2024. And it's been amazing. I had this vision that I would do it at 55. I don't know why I picked that number. There's this ad growing up for life insurance from my hometown that was called Freedom 55. And so I think that was implanted at like 8 or something, was like, hey, at 55, you're going to go do something different. So I did a little bit earlier than that. I'll turn 55 this year. But it was like, there was always just this like, there's something else I want to do on top of making games.
Yeah.
And so now I do that, but in the games industry. So yeah.
I absolutely love the story, and also your willingness to do that to help others, because you're right. There are lots of people out there getting themselves in these roles that they want to be a part of, but then realize, oh, there's more than I expected sometimes, which is, it's always going to be, it's part of the journey, right? But
yeah, absolutely.
We still need guidance and support in those areas and stuff. So the fact that you're one of the few, and I know that number is growing, but you're one of them that are out there helping others. So these amazing games can get out there.
Yeah, it's a good point. There aren't a ton of executive and leadership coaches or people doing leadership and development that have 20 years experience in games. It is pretty rare. There are people that are consulting, helping you ship your game. And I do that as well because of my experience in production and operations. Of course, I'm going to do that work. I love doing it. But the often thing I get from folks I coach, and when I tell them my history of working in games, their shoulders relax and they go, oh, like, you know what I'm going through. Like, you understand the complexity of this crazy career we've all chosen that's really hard to do. And there's always this moment, and I see it with every single person, where they're like, oh, I don't have to explain to you how you make a feature. I don't have to explain to you what alpha is. I don't have to tell you how hard finaling is. You just know. And so it can kind of accelerate, actually, the whole process a little bit.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into this too, maybe a little bit, but yeah, there are some differences too, in terms of the people needing some of those types of services versus maybe just regular coaching too. And
absolutely. Yeah.
But it's really interesting, but also super helpful, because it's like, we tend to think sometimes too that there's these people out there that are like, oh, they worked at AAA all their life, so they're going to have an easy time getting started. And it's like, not necessarily. No. They might know some connections, but connections aren't everything. They help. But.
Yeah, it's a very good point. The AAA person that has never done something themselves, giving advice to an indie studio, that can sometimes be an issue, because they maybe, don't understand running a studio when you don't have an army of support, and you don't have an executive assistant or a head of HR or a recruiter, because you're doing it all yourself. Like, you're setting up computers for people, and, your lead engineer is in your closet setting up the Perforce server. That's really common. So I hope people listening feel seen, because I get it. But if you've never experienced that, you can make some mistakes for sure. Yeah.
Crazy. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. But now let's get to know you a little bit more. And how we're going to do that is, folks, for those of you who are familiar with the show, is the Q Box round. So just a few quick random questions prepared today for you, Zoe. So the question I first am going to lead with, and always is, are you ready for the Q Box round?
I'm ready. I'm prepped. I'm good. I'm caffeinated. Wonder Woman is driving me. I'm good.
She has a Wonder Woman cup, by the way. It looks amazing. It's just vivid, bright red, and full of caffeine. So here we go. What's the most common mistake you see devs or studios make with their games?
Yeah, so I'm going to say thinking culture just takes care of itself. I think that's the number one. But then I also had a number 2. I'm going to give you 2 first.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Is it not editing your game early enough and prioritizing those features with the biggest impact? So like, be an editor, be rigorous, be brutal. Look at what you really need to put in that game to ship it, and edit it and prioritize it. And that doesn't just apply to indies. That's everybody.
Yep.
Doing the most isn't necessarily the best path forward.
Sometimes
what has the biggest impact? Yeah. What is the biggest impact?
Yeah.
What do you know your players actually want? Yeah. And that dovetails perfectly in with culture too, because if you can have those hard conversations, you can do it pretty easily.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. Well, I'm sure we'll get into that more in a minute. All right. Next is name one thing that motivates you every day.
Really, the bottom line is just helping people every day. I have clients that have these aha moments, so I always call them, where you see this like moment where they're like, oh, and you're like, yeah, 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 more of that. Like, let's go. What was that? What just happened? What did you just realize? And just knowing that I've helped them. And ultimately, my job is actually helping people be happier at work and live better, more fulfilled lives in this crazy industry that can be really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's more fulfilling than knowing that you're helping people with their fulfillment? Like, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Kind of ideal.
Love it. And last but not least, and the staple here on the show, folks, is what game are you playing now?
I'm completely addicted to Picopia. I am admitting that publicly. I have an addiction. I can't stop playing it. And fun fact, I was calling it Poketopia until 3 days ago. I thought that was the name of the game, even though I play it every day. So I was calling it Poketopia because in my head it was Pokemon plus Utopia, I guess.
Yeah.
That's not what it's called. It's Picopia.
But I feel like I want to call it
right. Now you're going to. I'm sorry. It's going to happen. Yeah.
Let's see if it catches. Poketopia, right? If we see it, or you guys mentioning it later on, we know where the source came from.
I started it.
Unless, and if you want to rebuttal, by all means, I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
And
I think it's a better name.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm always about less syllables, but the more syllables here works really well. At any rate. Okay.
I've planted the earworm. You're not able to get rid of it.
No. All right. Well, Zoe, thank you so much for sharing all that stuff. And now let's get into our conversation here, because this is one I'm really excited to get into more. Because like I led in with the intro, we're talking about studio culture, but specifically, it's how the studio culture that you never meant to build. Because that's why we're here. So I'm not going to digress here. And I'm just going to kick things off. And how we're going to do that is just, I'm curious, like, Zoe, what are some of the most common ways unintentional culture quietly shows up inside any team, really, whether it's an indie team or even a bigger studio?
The biggest one I think I see is just what you said, that it's unintentional. So someone, and maybe let's talk about the founder, the indie founder, as the first example, is they have an idea in their head of what they want the culture to be. But if they don't actually write it down and actually decide what it is and very intentionally describe it, the behaviors, how it affects decision-making, all of that stuff, it doesn't really trickle out into the rest of the people that you hire. It's just this almost like a spiritual belief system, I guess, rather than something that's recorded and talked about openly. And what founders don't realize is that they do set the culture, right? Like indie game studios, the culture is the founder's behavior, what they accept from people, the people they hire, of course, the way they communicate, how they behave in meetings, how they take feedback. Everyone watches that and people imitate it, because they see that that's the accepted culture and what they're supposed to do. And so I think that's the biggest thing that we see is this forgetting. I like to call it actually the cornerstone. So it's like the founder is the cornerstone. Like when you're building a building, there's, in the olden days, I don't know if they do it anymore because I don't know construction, but they would put a cornerstone in the building, and it was like where they'd put the date and who built the building or who designed it.
Yep.
That's the founder. Like that's the cornerstone of the culture.
Yeah.
And so the founder might be like, oh, I had a bad day. I yelled at someone. Then I didn't take feedback very well. Then I did this other thing. Well, it's like everyone's watching you. Everyone's seeing that behavior. And we all have bad days.
Yeah.
But if you don't want people to imitate that behavior, you have to be very intentional about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And that is a really interesting point that I want to kind of dive into a little bit more, because that right there is just like one example, just a very simple, relatable example, right? Hey, I was in a bad mood for whatever reason. I was upset and maybe yelled at someone or did something I didn't like necessarily want to, and then whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
From that, like, what else are some other like common ways like unintentional culture quietly starts
Yeah.
showing up inside these
Yeah.
teams?
I'll give you actually a very specific example from Timber. If anyone out there listening saw a lot of our public facing stuff on LinkedIn, we had this very inclusive culture. We wanted to have a lot of diversity on our team. It was very bright, sort of funny. We talked about development. And one of our values was taken from improv. And it was, we say yes and, we don't say no but. And it was to really encourage creative exploration. You know, we don't, when I work in production, I say, don't spike the volleyball. Like if a creative person is dreaming, don't immediately go, no, that's not possible.
Back in
like,
your face.
Yeah, like keep the conversation open. If it's not possible, then talk through possible solutions. Like always try and get to yes if you can. So it was a really welcomed, you know, our other founders, we all agreed. We thought this is really exciting. It's a great thing. What we discovered, and this took a long time to discover, is people on the team thought it meant you could never say no to anything.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But well, like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
We didn't say that. That's not how we behaved. It certainly wasn't our leadership culture. So it unintentionally got misinterpreted as people joined the studio that if some crazy idea was happening, someone couldn't be like, I don't think that's possible. It was really interesting. And there was a moment where we had to really look at the values and go, oh, we need to be super specific about how these values show up in behavior, in the organization, in our processes, and even, you know, throughout HR. If you, the one that drives me nuts, and like, if you have this as your value, sorry, I'm going to insult you, people that are listening, but saying we're people first. Because what happens when you lose your project and you have to lay people off?
Yeah.
Is that a people first behavior? Probably not, right? If you are about to go out of business and you have to take a project with a partner that you don't necessarily like working with, that happens, and your team doesn't like working with them, are you then going to drop that partner? But then those people don't have jobs. Is that people first? Like it's very like squishy. That's what I call it. They're like these squishy, vague values that you can't really put into practice because practically they don't really make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially under those certain scenarios and things that,
right.
hey, look, we never intend these things happening, but
we got to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got to think about it. And so that's the, you know, you've been talking about this sort of unintentional culture is if you, and I know we all groan at the idea of like values, like company values being written on the wall, because we know, oh yeah, like respect, integrity, innovation. It's like, those aren't values, they're words. So really write out what the thing is, right? Like, what is the thing you want people to do?
Yeah.
What is the outcome? What's the result of that value? And then how do you intertwine it into the actual day-to-day of making a video game? It isn't just some like vague thing that's inspirational. No. Your vision, your long-term vision for your company, that's inspirational. But your values are actually the day-to-day behavior of how your team treats each other and how you treat your players. Super important, right?
And I think these are really important things that you're calling out here too, because, well, one, I've worked with people before where it has come up about talking about values and why they're important and stuff, but there sometimes it's met with, and what are they really reacting in that moment? It's, oh, well, it might be, this is really just fluff. It's nothing concrete. And you know, at first it's like, I'll admit, sometimes I'm like, oh, they don't understand it. And I understand because these are some abstract concepts that I might have a little bit more of an understanding where they might not be. But in you saying that, there's very logical reason and truth behind why they feel that way. And it's not to say that they necessarily, they might feel it's fluff, but what led to that idea is that a lot of these abstract things aren't concrete, aren't very direct, and signal those things, which is what you just called out. So important there. Now, I'm really curious. I want to back up for a moment.
Go.
Ask, when you were calling out about we were talking about how there's ways that culture can shape itself unintentionally. You used timber. as an
Yeah.
example. And you said it
Yeah.
took a while. How did you guys ultimately figure out that's what was happening?
Honestly, it was that things were slowing down, like things weren't getting done. And I just could sense like a weird tension amongst between engineering and design. And I was like, there's just something not right here. I was the founder and studio director. I also was the director of production, but I was going to all the game reviews. We weren't that big at that point. And so I was very involved in the day to day of development. And I just could sense this like hesitation to be honest and clear about the state of the game, the build when we do build reviews, and then this like little rumbling tension between design and engineering. And one of our engineers, who was actually a very clear communicator, and I won't use the word blunt because it's not how I would describe them, but very clear in what they needed, what they wanted. And I just asked him what was happening, and he just said it outright, said specifically that value, and said, I feel like it's not okay if I say no. And if I do, I'm an asshole.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, what? And I had a very similar thing happen where we had a game review, and frankly, the game just was not living up to where it should be. And I was a bit shocked because at the end of the review, everyone was like clapping. It was like, that was awesome. And I was like, what is happening? People like, that was strange. And there was no feedback given in the review at all.
Interesting. Okay.
And I followed up with someone afterwards, one of the leads in the group, and said, hey, how did you think that went? And he's like, oh, it wasn't very good. I said, why didn't you say anything? And the word came up again, then I would be an asshole for doing that. And I thought, what has happened? Like something has happened with these values. And so that wasn't just the yes and value. That was some of the other ones, which was like there was this hesitation to be critical of anyone ever. And it was leading to a lack of quality in the actual game that we were making because people were really afraid of hurting people's feelings and upsetting people. Yeah.
Wow. And it's so interesting too, because we're talking about culture here.
Yes.
But yet, what was the culture actually doing to the end result, the actual product?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it was making it a lower quality, actually, because there was a lack of willingness of conflict. There was a fear of conflict, huge fear of conflict, and a huge fear of hurting people's feelings. And that actually shows up a lot in game development. When people aren't willing to say, you know what, the work is not meeting the bar. And it isn't a personal attack on that person. And maybe it comes from working in production because everyone is always critical of production.
yes.
So, and I feel you, designers, because everyone is also always critical of gameplay. I hear you. But there is this in production, you're always convincing people that production is actually not evil and that we're actually there to help. So you're almost always like, it's okay. Like, I hear you. I know you don't like this process. Let me make it better. And so you are kind of really used to hearing it a lot. And I also came from a studio, the Coalition, where quality was incredibly important. And it's something that everyone who worked there learned from Rod Ferguson. He led Gears at Epic, and he was very much about, we have to push for quality. Like, we have to prove that we can be the new owners of this franchise. And there was never a review you went to, everyone was like, awesome. and there was no feedback at all. I mean, of course we cheerleaded and we celebrated like crazy, but everybody in that room wanted the game to be the best it could possibly be and was willing to say it. But that's because we saw that leadership behavior in the leader who was in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So interesting. Just to kind of like break down quickly that whole story in the process of finding and these other examples, two things here that really stand out to me. One was it became pretty clear over time, though, right?
Yeah.
How communication breakdowns or even misalignment can actually impact production.
Yeah.
Because
majorly.
Yeah. And so that was like really interesting to me because it's like I know of these things, but never heard such a straight up concrete example of where this could happen.
Yeah.
And with all the right intentions too, because there was intentionality behind this.
Totally. Super intentional about our values. Yeah.
And then the other was, I think, even really revealing and really helpful and why I'm calling it out too is because you were sensing that some level of tension or conflict, right?
Yeah.
And it was you were picking up on it, but didn't necessarily get to the bottom of it until you happened to that first
Yeah.
individual who was very
Yeah.
clear in how they communicated, and then hearing it again, and ultimately it wasn't you were getting that sense of the
Yeah.
symptom, but then ultimately you found the deeper
Yeah.
root cause, and it
Yeah.
was from the values.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's something I often say to people too, and I don't want to discount the complexity of video game development because it is so complex. And there are, of course, technological problems. Of course, there are vision and creative and art problems. But ultimately, many of the problems that we face are people problems.
Yeah, it's
And
great. Yeah,
usually around communication, inability to give feedback, unclear goals, unclear vision. That actually comes from a people. And
yes,
so if we don't kind of recognize that and look at the people problems and fix just the symptoms, but not the core root cause of where the symptoms came from, it's just like with health problems. They
yeah.
never go away and
And,
they just will come back over and over again.
and you
Yeah.
know what? More than ever, probably a reason to establish these things too, especially with new team members, and have a
Yes,
proper
absolutely.
onboarding process.
Yes. Yeah.
Because as you were saying, that reminded me of a time when I had someone do some logo work for me, and I used to work with them at an agency that I previously
Right.
was at. And what was I found interesting was sometimes I was asking for things, and let's say she said she would get it to me by a date, and it didn't
Yeah.
come, and I was just
Right.
simply like, "Were you able to do this or not?" And
Yeah.
then I just wanted a yes or no, right? And I wasn't
Yeah.
clear with anything else. I was just like, I just want an answer, and that's all I cared about was the answer. I
Yeah.
wasn't mad or anything else, right? But then they started sharing all this, like whether it was a reason or excuse, or I don't know what it was, but it's all these other details. And I'm like, hey, it's okay. I just wanted to know if it was done or not. That's all.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay. It's just, I'm like, thanks. Cool. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
But in that, I thought a moment, and it's like, why did she feel she had to share that?
Yeah.
And was it, first I looked at myself, was it anything that
Yeah.
I might have done? And I'm like, I don't
Right.
think so. And then I'm like, but could it have been because she's still working in those agency
Yeah.
environments where
Absolutely.
there's
Right.
always like that
Yeah.
pressure and tension and
Yeah.
everything else? So
Yeah.
you have to be mindful of where people are coming from too sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And back to your point about why it's so important to be concrete and distinct,
Yeah.
and really outline the words on a wall with a nice like picture of someone rowing a boat or something,
We all row in the same direction.
Yeah.
That's another one of my pet peeves. I apologize for people that might have that as their value. But
Yeah,
yeah.
if that's okay to have it in your room and for it to represent that, but if it's like everybody walks into the office and they see that
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily make that point in terms
Yeah.
of what is concrete, what can people
Yeah.
buy into,
Exactly.
and own themselves too. That's another part
Yeah.
that like, oh man,
Yes. Well, accountability. I'm glad that you said that because then that leads to accountability from leadership, right? So,
Mm,
how do you hold people accountable for the behavior you want to see and the culture you want in your studio if you haven't made it really explicit?
yeah,
And so, if we don't do that, then what are we aligning to with each other that we expect of each other? It's not that we want everyone to behave the same. We don't want a bunch of robots. We want everyone to be unique and individual, of course, but there's certain baseline that is going to make the games better. It's going to allow people to be creative. It's going to allow for innovation because innovation is also really scary.
yeah,
So give people some strong ground to build on. And that's your culture.
yeah. I love it. We did talk a bit about how things can happen unintentionally,
Yeah.
and even with that
Even
intention.
intentionally, unintentionally.
So with that said, then let's just go back to what you were saying. Hey, you recognize those patterns and things like that. So,
Yeah.
and you've obviously have learned from that experience. And what would then be those first steps toward building a culture that's, say, more intentional or can
Yeah.
avoid those
Yeah.
misalignments or other potential
Yeah.
issues that can arise?
Yeah. The big one, and we've peppered this throughout the conversation, but is to make sure that when you do want to write about your culture, whether it's the values, however you write about it, is to write it down in a way that makes sense to you as a developer. So if you want to write about, we are creative first, that's a little vague. So you can write that down as like your inspirational thing, but then get really clear on it. Does that mean that if there's a conflict between two groups, creative is the one that makes the final decision? Might be, right? If it's not that, if your goal is we want to be acquired in 2 years and make a hit game, whatever, that's a very different goal than making a really cool indie art game that you just want to have recognized. So what's your goal? And then does your goal align to the values and culture you want to see? And is everyone aware of it? And so I think something we talked about when we first talked is some of the material I sent you is around operationalizing your values. So take that value and go every single group. So how does HR behave in this way? How are their processes aligned to this, right? How are we going to deal with conflict on the team? How do we deliver feedback? Maybe you are a team that is super concerned about being kind to each other. Okay, talk about it, but then how are you going to give difficult, critical feedback on someone's behavior and on the game itself? And so talk about it, write it down, actually document it. And like you said, onboard people to it. So when you're onboarding people, you don't just go over the values and talk about what they are, but you actually talk about how they are completely woven into the day-to-day of your studio and how you work.
Yeah.
There's an example I talk about a lot from the parent company that helped us found Timber, and it was Sumo Digital in the UK. A lot of wonderful, amazing leaders there, but they had an expense software that everybody universally hated. It was the worst thing I have ever worked with. It was so painful, so confusing. It's called Spot. Everyone hated it. But leadership didn't have to use it because all their executive assistants were doing all the entry for them.
Ah, okay.
So there was no desire to change that piece of software, but it made you want to like throw something into your computer screen. It was so hard to use. So what kind of friction are you creating when you just hang on to that thing that is frustrating 90% of your workforce every single day?
Yeah.
Is that a people first culture? I don't think so.
And
so, right, it's paying attention to those things and saying, what is the friction here that's good? And what is the friction that is just frustrating people with very little benefit?
Yeah. And it goes in so many different ways too. And also I think there's something to be said too about individuals of that team too, to feel, and again, it can definitely go back to founders as well too, but like understanding that you have a purpose there. You have value at the company. There's a reason why you're working there. And I know sometimes there's so many nuances and scenarios and stuff where it's harder to do, but I feel that everybody should still look at themselves as, hey, you have value at this place. There's a reason why you're there. And that because of that reason too, you should be able to feel empowered and comfortable enough to speak up. And it's not like you're complaining. Like sometimes we do want to complain and maybe to do a quick self-check, but there's value in what you have to say. And because maybe you identified a huge problem that is going to save the company lots of money, time, whatever it might be, or just save everybody from wanting to throw things at their computers because of this software.
You're making me think of, the person who says, there's so many executives who say this, my door is always open.
Yes.
Like, guess what? The junior QA person who just started at your company is probably not going to just wander in there.
Yeah.
So how do you create an open door culture with your leadership team? And how do you operationalize it?
Let's talk about that. That was entering actually my mind while you were talking earlier. Because I was thinking of the book Ask Iwata. I won't say anymore. Right. But let's kind of dive into that example. Hey, I always have an open door. But what does that really mean, especially for that junior? And so instead of maybe that, what are effective ways to show that you actually mean that policy? I always have an open door. So
I also will say, as a leader, you probably shouldn't always have an open door. because you have work to do. You have strategy and vision
Yeah. What
and
if they take you up on
creative
that?
feedback that you need to be doing every single day. And if all you're doing is just talking to people, you're missing a big part of your job. And I do see this sometimes at very large companies. So there's some balance there as well, right? Which is, am I focusing on the right
Yeah.
things?
Are you protecting your time?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you do want to be available to people, is be intentional about it. Book, just skip one-on-ones, like skip level one-on-ones is what they call them at larger companies. But just you book time with that new person and get to know them. Open up. Also, just anonymous feedback forums are excellent for that as well. Hey, folks, here's put your feedback in here. I'm going to address it in the next team meeting, even if your team is 5 people.
Yeah.
I would hope at a small team, you might not need to make it anonymous. Like I hope, but maybe you need a little bit of help with people raising things that they're concerned people will get upset about. But larger teams, the anonymous feedback is super helpful. And this one is hard. I've had a lot of leaders who want to drop in on not a postmortem, but but like a retrospective, like the end of a sprint or something. And that's challenging because then the team usually won't be honest about the issues they've faced. But how about the retrospective feedback? If there is anything that needs to be bubbled up to leadership, it's very clearly communicated and leadership has a chance to address it in the next team meeting. Just be very open about that stuff, very open communication. But then coming back to the open door policy is, I think some people think it's like being best friends with everyone on the team. And you also don't want that either, right? It's also when companies say we're a family, and I always kind of go, are you?
Yeah.
It's like, do you unconditionally love your coworkers? Probably not, because there are employment conditions there. So I think, with the open door thing, if you want to be available, is just to be intentional. Set up a system for yourself as a leader. I'm going to have a one-on-one. And this is operationalizing a value. I'm going to have a one-on-one with every new employee within their first 6 months. If it's a huge company, if it's a small company, maybe it's that you interview all your new employees because you're only 10 people. Maybe you want to be the one that is a decider in who gets brought onto the team. That is actually something you should be focusing on in a super small company, because you're going to be selecting the folks that are going to help accelerate what you need to achieve. So there's different ways of operationalizing it. And that's what I think is, make it intentional.
Yeah.
And then be consistent. Because inconsistent behaviors and inconsistent sort of values showing up in leadership behaviors is one of the biggest things that can break culture as well.
Yeah. And like we already identified earlier, can impact product and deadlines.
Always impacts product. Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing to talk about, is that it always impacts the product. Always. And I think we're seeing this right now play out in the press. And I won't name the company, but there is a particular company that's been in the press lately whose game failed. And now there's all this stuff happening with how those employees were treated and how they, didn't feel safe at work and they couldn't bring up issues. It leads to a lot of failed games.
Yeah.
And leads to a lot of poor decision making and a team that doesn't really want to be there. But they'll show up. They'll show up.
And probably go through the motions.
Yeah.
Check boxes.
Yeah.
and the time card. I was there.
Right. Like, is that what you want? No, this is an incredible industry full of super creative, smart people.
Exactly.
You want them motivated and excited and want to be there every single day they're at work. Yeah.
So all these things said and everything, I'm curious too. Because I know we talked about a little bit, but maybe like, and I think that actually goes back to some of what we just said with the intentionality. Let's say that open door policy, right? Hey,
yeah,
lead by example. Show,
yeah.
Give people an in. Don't make them come in, right?
Yeah.
What are other things too that, let's say leadership could help translate if they do have these values and they walk through people with onboarding and such, right?
Yeah.
How can they also, what are other ways that they can either show or translate those values, those vision into day-to-day behaviors without obviously seeing like, see, this is how this, like, because no one's going to do that. No one wants to hear that either. But like, how can they show that these values and visions can be attributed to the day-to-day stuff and obviously not overcomplicate that whole process too?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the number one thing is just write the stuff down. Like we said, put it in your onboarding. But it's really how you behave in front of the team. It's really openly behaving in that way. So going to the review and being very clear about your feedback and being very clear that that feedback is not directed at an individual, but is about the work, right?
Yeah.
That is so important. If someone on your team is complaining in a team meeting or in a review, or you're all in a call together, and so you could tell someone is really irritated, keeping your calm, being curious, asking them what's on their mind, asking them if they're okay. Just showing that behavior is going to trickle out for sure. And so it's as leaders, it is really being in touch with who you are as a leader, how you want to show up, and what you want your team to take from that. And when you mess up, admit it.
Yeah.
Very openly. Because there's an organizational psychologist, Adam Grant, and I always play this video when I do my conflict workshop, which is where we learn our conflict styles and we talk about them. And he says the most important thing you can do as a leader is to get up in front of your team and admit what you're not good at. Because the secret is they already know.
Yeah. That's a great point. Like,
you're not hiding it from anyone.
yeah.
So if you don't admit that you know and talk about it, they're all talking about it.
And I think that's so important because, one, it allows us an opportunity to be humble, like willingly, right?
Yeah.
And let's say, for example, and let's say skills. Let's just talk about like saying that they're soft skills. This leader is coming up, be like, hey, look, for whatever reason, I might look very stoic and like I don't care. I really do. But just however my expression, like I remember one time, fun story, like where I went into it was a pharmacy, and there's this pharmacist working there, and I swear just about every interaction with every person she ever had seemed like she was always upset. I don't know what it was. It was like that. But then after I saw this person for so many times, I was just like, I don't imagine that this person always is having a bad day, because that's what's communicated. Maybe that is just how. So, but let's say that was the case. Just for whatever reason, that's how she represented herself, and that was her. As a leader, if you identify and know that as yourself, like, obviously she's not in a position where it'd be like, hey, by the way, I might act differently than you might expect from most people. But as a leader, if you call that out, at least it opens people up to understand. And maybe this isn't the best example, but it does give you some
for sure
context. So that way people are like, oh, I don't get this. Now I at least understand them a little bit more, so I don't think they're mad at me for some reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a poker face. I'm really bad at poker face. And being an executive and leading teams of 200 people, you got to get up in front of them and have a poker face. But when I'm in a meeting, and the pandemic killed me for this, because you're on video and everyone's looking at your face. Whereas when you're in a meeting, in a group, in live, you know, be a little bit hidden.
Yep.
And I have to really self-regulate, because I will look like I'm upset or rolling my eyes, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. And I've had many times had to say, like, you're going to see expressions on my face that are very expressive. It doesn't mean I'm upset or angry. I just am thinking really hard. And I've even watched video playbacks of meetings, and I've been like, oh my goodness, what was I doing with my face? But it's just very, very hard for me. And a lot of people, you know, would say, oh, that's executive presence. It's like, my executive presence is fine. I'm just a very expressive person. And so my thinking comes out on my face, and I will frown if I'm thinking really hard, but I'm not upset.
Yeah.
So I have had to actually talk about that quite a bit in a team setting, and be like, hey, if you say something that really makes me think, don't worry, it's just my face. It's okay.
Yeah. But I think the key thing here too is also like being communicative of that. Sometimes I would say, this could be a fine line in how it could be interpreted, but in some ways maybe over communicate a little bit. Right. Because it can go a long way in certain circumstances and stuff. And I don't want to digress too much, but some of the things you were calling out too, I thought were really good points that I think related and similar to a book for anybody who is looking for like extra ideas and stuff, is called The Coaching Habit.
It's my favorite coaching book. I didn't put it in my like references.
Oh, but you were thinking
but
about
let's
it.
put it in there.
Okay, we
It
will.
is the best book about coaching because it's so simple
Yes.
and so easy for leaders to use. And Michael, who wrote it, is just remarkable. He's also based out of Toronto, even though he's Australian. So, a little shout out for Canadian company there. But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And his TEDx talk, it completely went viral. It was like a small little TEDx event, but it's called Taming Your Advice Monster. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And that book is incredible.
Okay.
Like absolutely incredible.
So we're throwing it in the show notes for later, so you can check it out.
Do it.
His one of his favorite tips or whatever strategies in there is the what else?
Yeah, and what else?
Yeah, and what else?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, let's do it. The what else one. All right. So do you want to? You could provide quick context in terms of.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think this actually really applies. Yeah. Let's talk about applying to culture because I think in games we promote people, and especially as founders of indie companies, you get into that situation because you've been really successful in your past careers, and you get promoted because you have all the answers.
Yeah.
You go to the meeting and someone asks you a question, you're like, I've got it. And you're the advice monster. You're like, I know all the answers. And so then as you grow in your career, and if you are the one with all the answers, you kind of develop incompetence in your team, right? And not incompetence that they can't do the work, but incompetence in a little bit of decision-making, a little bit of what do I do next, a little bit of prioritization, how do I solve things? So then they come to you with a problem and you're like, I know the answer. You're going to do this, this, and this. And they go on their merry way. And then when they have another problem, they come right back to you again. And then you solve that problem. And your whole day is spent solving your team's problems.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're solving the wrong problem because you haven't asked. And this is where the AWE question comes in, the and what else? Because they tell you a problem, but that's not actually what's going on. And what a beautiful segue back to culture. Because they might be saying, I don't know, our server costs are going up because we actually have too many players in the game. It's a great problem to have, but our costs are going to go up. And now the costs are too high for the number of players we have. What are we going to do? But maybe that's not actually the problem. Maybe there's something else going on there, right? And so if you say to them sort of what's on your mind, and then they tell you, and then you say, and what else? And then they tell you, and you keep delving. It's almost like mining.
Yeah, it really is.
Like you keep mining until you get to the core of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And once they tell you that, then you can start just being very curious about what they want. And that's the other thing he asks is very, very clearly actually say, what do you want?
Yeah.
Because someone also might be coming to you just to vent. Yeah. And they don't actually want you to solve anything at all. And I think in relationships, we've probably all learned this from our partners. You come over from a hard day at work and you're like, oh my God, this happened. And they're like, I know what you should do. You should do this, this, and this. And you're like, oh, I just needed a hug. Like I just needed a hug.
Yep.
And sometimes at work on your team, people need to vent a little, not too much, or they need to tell you multiple things that are going on and they need your help to dig into what the core problem is.
Yeah. Because let's face it, I mean, I'm starting to believe across the board, people just sometimes, probably a majority of us, and in different moments, we all have this, is difficulty articulating our problems. And why? Because they're somewhat founded in emotions too.
Yeah.
Not always.
We don't really know.
Yeah. It's hard to tell sometimes. Yeah. Unless you're constantly always like internally reviewing yourself, which I think if you do it too much could not be good either. It's hard to tell. Like we all have our moment. How many times is it easier when you hear someone else share their problems and you can kind of like listen and kind of guide them a little bit than if you're trying to do it yourself? You're like, all right, it's not working.
Yeah, I've had that moment with my own coach where I've almost been like, oh, I should have been able to solve this myself. And she's like, Zoe, there's no expectation that you can coach yourself. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. But you can, right? Start to think that a little bit. Yeah. But and leading that whole idea of the coaching habit is that you're really creating empowerment inside your team where they feel confident about their own problem solving, and they might just need to talk through it with you.
Yeah.
But they're really smart and they already have the answer inside them, usually.
Yep.
They just need help untangling it. I talk about it like it's a yarn, like a ball of tangled yarn, and you're kind of pulling on the yarn and you're like helping untangle a knot and you're pulling on the yarn. But that's all it is.
Yeah.
You're not unraveling the whole ball for them. You're just pulling on little hints and things in there that need some discussion.
And
yeah.
what's really great about that too, that whole process really goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like looking at those symptoms, right?
Yeah.
And in a way, like you see what those symptoms are, and now this is a really helpful method. And if you read the book, you'll see that they back it up with a ton of science and research that they were doing it too.
Yeah.
And it's a great method and way to then get to the bottom of it. But also, even the just was one little piece that we talked about, it does another thing that's cool too. Not only are you getting to the bottom of problems, not only are they coming to the conclusions of those problems, but now you're also empowering your own team. And you're still doing your work, and it's in a structured format that can get answers, save you time. Like everything is now done very intentionally how you probably always wanted it to be done.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll be amazed that you're like, wow, the team is firing on all cylinders. And it's because you have actually taught them how to solve problems themselves, if that makes sense. Like you haven't taught them the specific solve, but you've taught them how to do the thinking process to get there. And you've just guided them in that way. The one caveat I want to say, and this is something that I saw when the coaching habit really took off in businesses, and it's something that I call boomerang coaching, which is my own term, which is the leader who the person comes to them and the leader just says over and over again, well, how do you want to solve it? And that does not feel good.
No. Because
that person is actually coming to you for help and you've just flipped it around and been like, oh, well, I'm coaching you because I've just said, how do you want to solve it? That really isn't helpful.
Yeah.
So yes, getting into the core of it. Yes, asking them what they need. All of that stuff is so important. But if the person is actually coming to you and saying, I have too much work on my plate, I am stressed out, I'm burnt out, that is a very different situation. And so you do as a leader have to be very aware of, is this a coaching moment? Is this a slightly more directive moment? Do they just need me to step in here and help them? And that's something sort of in the leadership training world we call the leadership continuum. And so it's that sometimes you do need to be directive and sometimes you are more coaching. And we do find, of course, if you're 100% a really directive leader, that's a really hard place to exist.
Yeah.
Because your team becomes so dependent on you. Yep. But I never want to sort of prescribe like your culture should be 100% a coaching culture. No, there's different moments for different types of leadership. And being able to do that is also sort of a part of your culture and a part of your values is like, when do we step into these different types of leadership frameworks kind of is what it is. Yeah.
No, definitely. And
but
really,
don't be the boomerang leader.
Yeah. Don't be that person. As we come to the end of our conversation here today, I'm curious if a team really wants to build a culture that reflects who they are, and also support the game, support their team, where are some good places for people to start? I know we had some initial ideas, but like, what's a really good starting point for anyone considering this?
Read The Coaching Habit. It's excellent. It's short. It's great. He also has a great podcast about change management. It's a really good starting point for sure. And now I'm just going to sound like I'm plugging myself, but I'm going to say ask for help. So there's no assumption that just because you have made games before or you've worked at a large company or now you're a founder that you know how to lead people or how to create culture. Even if someone who's listening who is considering taking a lead role or considering becoming a director, or maybe they're going to be promoted even higher than that, that's a scary moment. You do need help from someone. And bringing in someone who can help you with that, getting yourself an executive coach, is actually a really big part of that. Now, if you can't do that because of resources or you don't have the means to do that, just get together with those important folks on your team who are excited about this stuff and write it down. Write it down. and keep referring back to it. One of the most powerful experiences I had is when I worked at Riot, and we put the values at the beginning of every single presentation. Whenever you were pitching or presenting a feature to leadership, you always had the values on the very first page of your presentation. And so you were always talking about the work in relation to the company values.
Yeah.
So if they become disconnected, that's, going to be your biggest thing. So it's like, how do we integrate this into our day-to-day and just have that conversation, right? Just have the conversation. Ask your team, hey, do you even know what the company values are?
Yeah.
Because a lot of them might say no.
Yeah, it's so true. And actually, even recently, I think inadvertently been doing this with some other work I've been doing. But like, what's great. It's like, it's an internal value that we're establishing, but it's like said through marketing activities. It's said through a dev blog that we're working on, and it's really like And what's great about that is it's also not only internal facing, external facing. So the public sees that too, and that sets their own expectations as well. They align with the studios, and there's just so many cool things that can happen when you do those things, and that way everybody then starts becoming on that same page.
Yeah, absolutely. I just realized, was that my opportunity to give my 3 tips? And then I didn't give the 3 tips.
No. I'm still giving that to you.
It's not there yet.
But just do it. She's jumping the gun, and I like it. So
awesome. I was like, wait, did I answer what I was supposed to?
No.
So along with the coaching habit, read Jim Collins' books.
Yes.
They are so good. His website is excellent too. Watch his talks. You might be like, oh, he's older. He doesn't get this stuff. He's done so much research. He's researched all the most successful companies out there. And so go for it.
I just want to call out Good to Great in particular.
Oh, so
I need to read his other ones.
Books.
But the reason why I love Good to Great is because if you read that, it might not relate to anything with games, but when you start thinking about his process and how he did it, and then apply that process in your own way to games, it's like it will open up this whole like aha, like you'll see so many things so differently with the stuff you're doing. So sorry, keep going.
No, absolutely. I love that you said that, because he also on his website, he has a talk about I love his metaphor, but he uses it as like set the culture and then know who's on the bus with you.
Yes, I remember that part. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Where it's like, there may be people that don't want to get on that bus. And that's a really hard decision, but you need to know who is on this bus, who is here to do these things the way that we want to do them, and make that choice. Yeah. But great by choice is I think actually where the bus metaphor comes in. I have to remember. And then Built to Last, but B 2.0 is the latest one that I read, and it's excellent. And then he's just written a book about, it just came out. It's about how to live a meaningful life. And it super appeals to me. That's, a little bit of the way I live my life, but I haven't read it yet, but it's on order. So it will be interesting, but it's a little bit less about the business and more about, creating more meaning in your life, where a lot of those folks are kind of heading now as they get older, which I find interesting. Yeah. And then I already said this, but get yourself a coach. As a beginning founder, you need that support. And I know this in my core of my being that you need that help. If you can't afford it, reach out to people. They might have a sliding scale.
Yep.
They might be willing to do something for you. I've been coaching people that are currently unemployed that have been part of the layoffs pro bono. We often, AAA studios and bigger studios, do organizational engagements. They usually, a coach will charge them a little bit more, so they can charge indie studios a little bit less. So you never know unless you ask. And then the last one, and we already talked about this, but just don't let the culture be an afterthought, because it will come back to bite you in the butt later on. And it always does. And I've seen it time and time again. I have many people reach out and say, oh, we're having these problems. And then I dive deeper and I ask the "and what else?" question. And it's usually a culture problem. Yeah. And by culture problem, I put in there communication, conflict, like are people being clear and honest with each other, psychological safety, all of that stuff. It's all wrapped up in that. It's also intertwined. And so just ask yourself too, is this thing we're having, is it a culture problem? If we're not hitting the quality bar I want us to hit, is that because the team doesn't understand what quality is? That might seem like a process problem. It's actually a culture problem.
Yeah. Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Zoe, I can't thank you enough for all these tips, insight, everything that we talked about today. But before we go, and before you drop us some links,
Yeah.
I understand that you have something you're willing to share with our audience.
Yeah. So I always do a free 30-minute session, always. So if you just go to my website, the link is right there, and you can just book a free 30-minute session. But if you reference in there that you heard me on this podcast, I'll give you a 10% discount on any of the packages. So coaching or consulting for the future. So we can do a 30-minute, hey, can I help you? Am I the right person for you? I also will help you find someone else if I'm not the right person for you. I have a large network of folks that I work with as well, because sometimes my expertise might not be exactly what you need. But yeah, if you hire me after that, 10% off. And then my website is www.lumina-leadership.com. So Lumina, LUMINA-leadership.com. And that's also my email. It's just add a Zoe in front of that. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'd love you to come over there and hit the little bell and follow my posts. Some of them are about cats, some of them are about leadership and video games. So I tend to write kind of personal things. People like that, about my own experiences and thoughts and feelings. And I also have a newsletter that's also on my website that you can sign up for. I'd love
Awesome.
to talk to you.
Really appreciate all those things, and especially that offer. So folks, again, if you're interested, think this could be something for you, or you need that type of help and assistance, like some of the things we were talking about earlier, check out Zoe's website, lumina-leadership.com. Sign up for that 30-minute session if you think if it would be worthwhile. And if you mention Indie Game Movement podcast that you heard Zoe here, you get that 10% discount off of future coaching or consulting packages if that's the right fit for you. Zoe,
Yeah,
I can't thank you enough. This has been great. So much fun.
absolutely.
And I just being able to dive in even deeper into this type of conversation, because again, it's there's so much more going underneath things that we don't always realize. And I really appreciate you getting to the bottom of it. So we now have clarity about, hey, how sometimes unintentionality can surface things in what we're actually producing. So again, thanks so much for this.
Absolutely. It's going to lead to better games, right? That's what we all want.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.